I'm so excited to go through this computer build with you guys. This is a build that is a higher end build. We're using NZXT products. We're using HyperX, AMD, and Intel. So let's go ahead and pan through those products real quick and I'll show you what they are. All right, guys, we're going to go through this build. But before we do, I do want to let you guys know we are on social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So if you ever do have any tech tips that you want to see or any questions, feel free to hit us up there at NextTech NT, and we'll talk to you guys there. But I think it's really important as we jump in to let you guys know that all of the products in this video are not sponsored. They're all stuff that I choose to make my build. They're really great products. I would highly recommend them, obviously, as I use them. But I just want to make sure you knew that as we jump in. Also, if you haven't already, hit subscribe to this channel. It really does help support this channel and help us create more content to give you tips, tricks, and tech stuff to help your business. So I really do appreciate if you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. And as we move in, I hope you guys enjoy this build video. What we're going to start with is the motherboard. I like to start there because it's really the connector of all your pieces. So it takes your RAM, it takes your GPU, CPU, and kind of glues it all together, all of your inputs and outputs, and brings it into the area. So I open that up first and I start connecting things even before I put it in my case. Motherboards can range anywhere from like around 100 to a few hundred, $500, $600, $700. It really depends on what you want. So you want built-in Wi-Fi, USB-C, what generation of CPU are you getting? So what I like to do is I like to spend around $150 to $200 on a normal build for a motherboard. Normally it'll give you Wi-Fi, it'll give you other things. So when you're picking your motherboard, what's important though is to make sure that it fits your processor. That's the main question. As long as your processor fits in your motherboard, then you can start picking other parts. So let's go ahead and I'll show you the motherboard. All right, guys, for this build, we're going to use the NZXT motherboard. It does fit the 10th gen Intel processor. So we're going to go ahead and open that up. All right, as you can see, this is the motherboard. This is where the processor goes. This is where your RAM's gonna go. Your graphics cards go in here. And our SSD, our M2 SSD is gonna go probably in this spot right here or over here. So this is a really cool one because it's all covered up. So we're gonna go and open that up and get our parts exposed so we can install a few things. All right, so as you can see, this is where the M2 little slot is. There's also one right here. What I like to do first is I like to install our processor first. This gets it out of the way, puts it in. So we have a 10th gen Core i7 processor that we're gonna install today. So we're gonna open that up. All right, guys, this is the processor. I try not to touch it too much, really just to put it in the board. So the processor is really the brain of the computer. What it does is it goes through all of the different places. So it tells the computer whether it needs to access RAM, GPU, CPU, and it makes all of the calculations needed for your computer to run smoothly. The processor is typically something where you don't have to buy the latest gen processor. Most of the time, an i5, i7, or a Ryzen 5 or Ryzen 7 is really going to be enough. You don't have to buy the next gen highest processor. If you're looking to save a little bit of money on your computer build, this is where you can save money. For example, this build is an i7, not an i9, because we don't need it to be an i9. So I figured I would save about $100 and buy an i7. So let's go ahead and get that installed. So the processor should just drop in, and typically there's an arrow, if you look right here on the edge of the processor, that should line up. But also there are safeguards. There's a little notch here and a little notch over here that helps make sure you line it up properly. Once it is lined up, you're gonna go ahead and close it. Bring this lever up and then bring it back down. And when you're pushing it down, you're gonna push kind of a little bit harder. It's gonna lock all of these things into place, and you're gonna tuck this lever right back in under. And now your processor is installed. So the next step for me to install is the solid state drive. So in this build, we have a Samsung Evo 970. It's a 1 terabyte SSD. It's an M2 drive, which what that means is it's just plugs into the M2 slots on the motherboard, and we'll show you that in just a second. So the important thing about buying storage for your computer is really, you probably only have to have 256, but you have to look at your computer and figure out what you need. You should always buy an SSD for your operating system, as it allows your computer to find things faster, start up quicker. Picture it as a hard drive will spin around until it can find the right data. A solid state drive can just access the data. So it's really important that when you have your main OS, you really want to just access and not have to spin a bunch to find the data, which is why a solid state is a lot faster than a hard drive. So let's go ahead and install that right now. So like I said, this was an M2 slot. So you just notice how this is the input right here where you're going to plug it into your motherboard. So you do is you just kind of set it in. And then what'll happen is it'll come down here and rest, and we'll go ahead and get our screw and screw that in. All right, now that we have our CPU installed and our storage, the next thing I'm going to install is our RAM. Think of your RAM as short-term memory. When your computer is trying to calculate functions and do these things, it's easier, even for your brain, to recall things that happened that day. So RAM, it's like short-term memory. It stores things in there that will be used frequently, and you're allowed to access that information quicker than if you had to go through everything to access it on a solid state drive or anywhere else. So RAM, think of it as short-term memory. It remembers it quicker, helps speed up processes. The important part about RAM is you want to have at least 16 at this point is what I would recommend. And the more you have, the more storage that can be stored there to be accessed quicker. So that's how you kind of decide on what RAM it is. I would do minimum 16. That's what I would really recommend for most people. Sometimes you can jump up to 32. In this install, we're actually going to install the HyperX RAM, and it's 64 gigs of RAM. So let's go ahead and get that installed. So when you're installing your RAM, you want to look and make sure that these marks right here is going to line up with the gap here. So in this case, I have to flip it over. So you want to make sure the line marks up, and these little levers will pop out so you can slide your RAM in. So then you can slide in one at a time. When installing your RAM, you want to push it down to make sure all these levers clip in, and then you'll know that it's all the way in and it is secure, because now I can shake it and it doesn't move at all. All right, so we're gonna put these covers back on because we're done installing our stuff right now. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to put this motherboard in the case. The case that we chose for this build was the NZXT H710i case. It comes with a little bit of RGB lighting. It's completely all black, so this motherboard will look really nice in there. But a case is really completely about personal preference. As long as your motherboard will fit in your case, for example, this is an ATX motherboard, and the case will fit an ATX motherboard. So that's the one spec when you're looking at your case. Make sure that it will fit that. So we're gonna go ahead and install this in the case right now. All right, so as we set the motherboard in, you'll notice there's this little peg right here that will keep the motherboard from sliding around. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and set the motherboard in, and I'll show you how that works. See, now that the motherboard's in place, I can kind of move things around and it doesn't actually slide around. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead and screw everything in. guys, so for me, the next part we're going to install is our cooler. So the cooler comes in two different ways. So you have a copper cooler, which is similar to this, where the copper extracts the heat from the CPU and brings in these coils, and the fan blows it and cools it off. So that's a copper cooler. In this build, we actually have an enclosed water cooler. So we're using the NZXT Kraken water cooler. And what this is a radiator that circles water around the CPU. And the fans, just like in your car, the fans will blow onto that water and cool it down and keeping your CPU low. But let's go ahead and go in and jump in and build that piece. All right, guys, so let's talk about all these parts. So it comes with 3 fans, and these 3 fans we're gonna screw onto this cooling unit. So we're gonna put those 3 fans on here. We're going to take out the fans in the front, move them to the top, and install the cooler on the front. So let's do that. It's really important to note that this CPU, if you look at the bottom of it, it does have thermal paste. That's this gray stuff right here. You don't really want to touch it, but what that does is it helps conduct the heat from the processor to this copper. You do have to have thermal paste. If you end up wiping that off or getting it smudged, you can buy thermal paste and put it on yourself. Just put like a little blob in the middle, and what that will do is it'll press it out and kind of help, and then you'll have thermal paste on it so you can use it. So just want to make that note real quick while So the next part we're going to install is our graphics card. So then we're going to install an AMD Radeon 5700 XT. This graphic card is great for normal use, for gaming use. Even if you're rendering some videos, it'll work really well for that. If you're not really doing any gaming, rendering videos, or high graphics editing, then I would recommend picking up like a $50 graphics card rather than spending money on a graphics card, because you don't really need it. But this is the one we're using for this build, so we're gonna go ahead and put that in. So the last thing I like to install is the power supply unit. So we're installing the NZXT C850 power supply unit. It's actually modular, so you'll have less cords. You don't have those extra ones that have to stay there. And the power supply unit, like it sounds, it provides power to your whole computer. The reason I like to install it last is I like to have everything in place and then route the cables through the case so they can be managed and looking nice as I install it. So let's go ahead and get that installed. All right, guys, it's a moment of truth. Let's see if it works. We're gonna press this power button on this power supply, press the front panel button, see if it turns on. Here we go. No lights yet. Oh, it's beautiful. Power's on. Got my temperature showing already. Oof. Here we go. Now the real question is it gonna post? And here it is, booting up. What we gotta do now, we gotta install Windows 7, Windows 10, and get this thing going. Install now. We're gonna say I don't have a product key because I'm not gonna put that in yet with you guys. We're gonna do Windows 10 Pro. Accept the terms. Custom install because I have to format, or and click new. Okay. and now it's going to install Windows 10 just like that. So once it's installed, we're going to download the NZXT software, the cam software, and we're going to get that logo facing the right way, and then we'll be done. That'll be it, guys. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me through this build. It was a lot of fun for me, and I hope you like the computer and the way it looks. Let me know your build experiences down below in the comments. I look forward to seeing you guys for the next video, but until then, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. I greatly appreciate it. And thank you guys so much for joining me. Bye.